I also like the idea that, like, if the maidens ever disappear, the Chosens of Secrets, like, immediately become, like, crypto dude bros, where it's like, sign up for our thing and we'll teach you 7 secret tricks to make money in the realm now, or something like that. But I do very much like the Sidereals. It's the one group I get, I think.
They're kind of the mages of Exalted, so
Yeah, in fact,
yeah.
in the revised Laws of Ascension Premium Edition, there's a letter from a Sidereal that's like, yo, I'm you, which is funny because people are like, oh, the connections are always vague between the World of Darkness and the Age of Sorrows. And I'm like, not in
They
this one, but yeah,
they
obviously
were
that's
except
gone.
for that one.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and obviously that was abandoned in later editions, and like the
Yeah.
idea of connecting them is a little bit garbage. It's kind
It
of fun.
it sort of lost its legs like halfway through first edition. Like clearly it was one of the ideas that they
Yes.
had, and it is kind of a cool idea, but like you reach a point where you are like, creation is not Earth, and it's
Yeah.
very clearly not even Pangea. Where like what happened? It didn't even make sense from that. Like
The conceit, the analogy I will have is somebody running in a very nice looking but poorly made costume, and like pieces are just kind of falling off. And then eventually you're just like, do we keep with the charade or do we? No, okay, we're just going to pivot.
no,
You just
okay.
put on the
Yeah.
hockey mask. Yeah. Um,
Welcome to Bonus Experience. This is a podcast with a deeper look at the play experience and the finer details of running and writing games. We are two queer people speaking with authority about games. I'm here with a different co-host. Please welcome Terry Robinson of Mage the Podcast, I guess also my coworker sometimes, technically.
Hi, Mage fans.
And yes, we swear, I'm mad about it.
Yes, yes. And in our last conversation, we talked about our experience with Dungeons and Dragons players, or players where Dungeons and Dragons was their previous only RPG experience, and how that seemed to systematically differ from other players. I think one of the interesting things, though, that we get out of that is they often have a very clear notion of progression, and I think this feeds into a question I have and a fight I am willing to start, which is, do people actually want character development in their RPG characters when they say they want character development? And I think the things, though, that I do find interesting about the D&D play experience is kind of this notion of level, that all the things the character does will grow in a certain way. So there's this baked in notion of kind of character growth. And one of the things that I have found in the RPG discourse that I'm not sure how I feel about it, he said, pivoting suddenly between topics, is the notion of, do people actually want character development? And
Okay.
I am going to say that there is a not insubstantial group of people that say they want character development, but they don't. Now, this is dependent on a couple of definitions. To me, there are 3 things that could be described as character development. The first is character advancement. Your character gets new things they can do, new bits and bobs. I got a new charm. So your character has developed in the sense that the way they approach a challenge has changed because there's literally a new tool in the toolbox.
Right, yes.
The second is character, what I'm going to call discovery, which is 2 components. You figuring out how you want to play your character, where someone's like, oh, what does your character want for dinner? Oh, I've never thought about what my character wants for dinner. Well, they were raised here,
Like
but they always...
like, well, what hobbies do they have? And you're like, what?
And filling in backstory. Does your character have any siblings? Does your character have any exes running around out there? And so on.
Right.
And that, to me, can be called character development, but I think when most people say character development, they don't necessarily mean that. So that to me is backstory completion.
Okay.
Or filling out your character. And the last one is the set of personality traits that your character has that are different than when you started, that are not tied to the first 2, which is a real wordy way of saying your character went out in the world, your character experienced some stuff, and now your character thinks different things. And more importantly, acts in the world in a different way.
Okay.
Your character,
Interesting. Okay.
your young idealistic character realizes that the system they work for is broken and that all of their time has been wasted, to pick a particularly emotionally brutal one.
Yes.
Or your character.
That's pretty fucking brutal. I think you can also experience this positively, but go on.
Yeah, your character learns to trust someone else. Your character was an angry loner. You join an adventure group as the Logan of your group, and you find your proxy daughter character, and then you create a multi-billion-dollar X-Men franchise that they haven't figured out how to iterate on.
Just as a random example.
Yes. I mean, I think that was part of Campbell's hero's journey, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
That was somewhere between Descent and the Underworld. And so that third type, where if we were to rewind the clock on your character, they would fundamentally make different choices, even controlling for power, where your character is now bitter, or your character is now innocent, or your character has learned to love, or your character has learned not to love and trust other people. I think that third type of character development, which is I think what a lot of us mean when we say character development, is not necessarily something people want to have their character actually experience, because frequently it involves a mix of trauma and triumph from the world. It is hard to roleplay responding to that, and I think in a lot of cases we fall in love with a certain image of our character, and we don't necessarily want that to change. And again, codicils on this does not apply to everyone. I'm merely indicating the universe of people who say, I really want to see character development, is smaller than it actually is.
So I have so many thoughts about this. Obviously, character advancement is the easiest thing that people are interested in. And I've actually encountered people who aren't that interested in character advancement.
Okay.
Yeah. I've encountered some people who like to roleplay. They like inhabiting a character. They like hanging out with friends. They like playing the game. And if their character gets stronger, cool. Like, that's a fun benefit. Like, I've definitely played with some people who are just not that into getting stronger or like leveling up or whatever. It happened because that's how a lot of games go. And the second one, I know some people who are very interested in like writing the backstory ahead of time. And I'm certainly one of those GMs who's like, don't write me a novel because I don't have time to read it.
Please don't do that to me. Yeah.
Yeah, please don't. I don't have time to read it, and like if you want me to know all these weird specific details that you've already fleshed out, then there's nothing interesting for me to buy into. This is a two-way street. If you want to write about like your tragic past leading up to this point, that's fine, and if that's an exercise you want to engage in, that's cool, but like if you want your ex to show back up, you just kind of got to be like, I have an ex, she hates me. That's all I need. I'll fill in the rest. Or if there's something very specific that you want to see, like, she hates me, but also we kind of ended on good terms, so it's a complicated hate, and it's like, cool, delicious. I'll figure that one out. Don't give me a full fleshed out profile with your, like, I made this shipping chart for you. It's just like, that's too much. I gotta be surprised, too.
When you said shipping chart, I thought you were talking about the long run, the guild logistics game that I want to have in Exalted. And then I'm like, oh no, that means a different thing to many people.
Yeah, I'm not talking about logistics. I am talking about kissing.
Talking about love logistics. The far deadlier of the two. But when I say character development, do you think people are generally talking about that third category, or do you think they're talking about all three?
I think people combine the last two into the same thing. And the people who are interested both in like character discovery / backstory development, and the people who are interested in seeing where their character ends up are interested in both of those things informing each other. Some people, I think, are attached to the iconic idea of their character, and some people are not. And I think some people who are interested in character discovery and background development are more likely to allow their character to change than people who aren't. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think saying this out loud, because I only understand things when I've said it out loud to another human being, is that because I approach games as we are a group of writers, it is not your character, it is our story. And that changes maybe who wants to have development occur. Where it's one of those things where someone says, well, I want this event to happen, but for that to happen, this character kind of has to be different. And then character development occurs because you're like, well, how can I justify that within the story? Well, your character is now bitter because this happened, and ta-da, character development has occurred. Where if someone is more of a, this is my character in this story, it is now much more up to that person performing that character to say, hey, do I want this character to change?
Yeah, I've also like sometimes I think the third one, because when you were explaining it and talking about your approaches to it, I'm like that is also something that happens without people consciously thinking about it, especially if
Okay.
your people are invested in the change, like I just said. Because there have been times, and I'm going to talk about just me as a player, where there have been times where I've been like, I really loved this character, I really liked the story that we told through this one campaign, and I would like to play them again. Some people don't do this. Some people do this all the time, because I'm actually considering replaying a character right now. And when I sit down to replay this character in a new system or to carry them over into something else, obviously you're going to have to change some details because not every game is the same. But like looking at this character and being like, so where in their development do I want to begin again with it? Because I have had a bunch of characters who like really grew a lot over the course of the game, because I am the sort of person interested in character discovery, and therefore I am open to my character changing. Looking at this character whose arc was about literally learning to be a better person and to treat other people with humanity and to, stop being a product of a toxic environment. Do I reset the clock back to being very much a product of that environment? Because she certainly learned her lesson by the end of the game and was a different person with a different outlook. And I didn't consciously decide for that to be the character's arc. That's just how the change happened, because I'm open to change. And it was a slow growth, which I thought was very interesting, because the character was in a fantasy species who live a long life. So it was very interesting to me also that like a character who's not immortal but very long lived also took a very long time to come around on the lesson.
When you say that in such vague terms, I really hope you're talking about like Shub-Niggurath or something, or like a great old one who really had a change of heart.
No, so we played in a homebrew mecha game, and me and one of my friends played giants in this mecha game. So instead of being like the Escaflowne, we were just like really big people who like I wrote up a bunch of lore for many, many years ago. And it was like one of my favorite characters, and H has since and the system was hot garbage. H has since like redone a whole bunch of excellent mecha rules and was like, hey, if I redid this in that old setting, would you want to redo this? And I revisit these ideas, bring them into 2022 instead of 2006. Revisit that idea, revisit this character, and I was like, hell yeah. Then I, had that whole like, where would I pick this character back up? Do I reset her story? Does she learn to be less of an asshole again? Or do I treat her as a new character from the end of that arc, where she starts off a lot more pleasant than before?
Monica, I think one of the most important aspects of character development is to stop in the middle to explain the things that have made the game possible. What makes bonus experience possible?
Right. BXP and the mid-episode break room are brought to you by the Misdirected Mark Network.
Bing!
Thank you. Become a BXP patron. Patrons get to chat with us directly. They get special Discord roles. And now I can promise exclusive content. There are 2 preview episodes of our new show, Bonus Level, and they will continue to come out until I have a season together, at which point they will go live on YouTube. But you get it early, patrons. And if you would rather support BXP without Patreon, you can always subscribe on Ko-fi instead, ko-fi.com/bonusexp, which also, if you give us one-off donations, you can have immediate access to the bonus level episodes. Or you can go buy our stuff. Go to bxpcast.com/bxpswag and check out our merch page. From that page, there's also a link. Don't forget, Bonus Experience is sponsored by Nerdy Kepi, where you can get all kinds of really fucking cool queer swag. Remember to use code BXPcast at checkout for 10% off. And that never expires. Their stuff is high quality, so it's a little expensive. So if you're eyeing up those really, really cool, really expensive By Pride flower shoes, which they're really fucking cool, I own a pair, you should buy them. You can use that 10% off and then come back and get yourself a skirt with pockets. Just saying, never expires. But remember that saying nice things is always free. Leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever, and help us get more listeners. Also, as a bit of news, I am currently in the process of putting all of Bonus Experience's back catalog up on YouTube, so you can look forward to that soon.
What is the contrivance of Bonus Level?
Bonus Level is a show where me and it's currently just 4 other game designers, but I'll probably have other guests come on at some point. We attempt to play a video game while also talking about a tabletop topic, like usually a design topic or some sort of topic that requires a thought. We specifically pick topics that require thought while playing a game that's hard. And currently we've been playing Paladins Champions of the Realm, which is a team shooter, very much like Team Fortress 2, with a broader cast of characters closer to Overwatch. And so we attempt to be like, what makes a good character sheet? What's good character generation design? How do you design good NPCs while also playing a team shooter in which we are being shot at? And,
is there somebody that has surprisingly strong feelings? Like, I picture someone, like, insert someone who is generally mild-mannered, like you're talking with Vance, and they're like, yeah, the key to a good character sheet is, come on, he was right fucking there! How can you miss him? Making sure that there's adequate space for...
Elliot has so far been one of our regular guests.
Okay.
Part of the core crew who's been doing this so far. And Elliot has all kinds of very smart, even-keeled things to say, and then will occasionally be like, I'm dead! It's very funny. Also, Dee is another cast member, and Dee has a tendency to just lose the thought. We'll be speaking a whole bunch, and then we'll be like, oh, I got a tank, and then and then just the thought's gone.
Yeah.
So the comedy, I hope, is in listening to us lose our train of thought, yell at the game, and try our best to get these coherent thoughts out.
I picture Dee as eventually being the Robert Evans of RPGs and doing this, like, tell-all biography. Like, I have been brought in to fix Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. And, there he was, Sandy Peterson, crying on the phone, and you could hear him sniffling up a fine storm. And I says to him, boy, I've been in this biz a long time. I've worked with better, I've worked with worse. We're going to get you through this, but it's going to cost you. And I slammed down my car phone and my 1997 Lincoln Navigator, and I'm like...
It's not like that.
Exactly.
If you like bonus experience, you'll also like Thaka with Advantage. Ange and Jared love talking about RPGs and D&D. Together they share insights into the games they're running in the campaign journal and then tackle a variety of topics that affect the game in the DM's workshop. They're going to talk anyway, so they might as well record it. Maybe you'll even pick up an ancient D&D factoid about a previous edition of the game that you'll never use.
In my head, you are tall enough that you can double jump. I don't know how those two are done. Like, your normal jump is just an upward jump, but when you hit the spacebar a second time, that's when we get the Monica thing.
Yeah,
and
I used to be strong enough to almost do that.
to jump while jumping.
Yes. It's technically not impossible. I used to be like a college athletic high jumper.
Did you just, like, step over the bar for, like, pole vaulting?
I wish. No, I did in fact have to run and then throw myself through the air over it. But
you didn't
like,
use a pole, though. That was
I didn't use a pole.
Yeah.
I was not a pole vaulter. I was a high jumper. That's where you have to
okay.
use your whole body, not the pole.
Oh, the joke I was trying to set up was that you were so tall that you pole vaulted, but
like
you didn't need the pole. You just, like, stepped over it.
If only. I wish. Yeah. If only. There's a point at which at, like, serious competitive levels that starts being pretty difficult, actually. I was pretty good. Like, I was in the top, like, 100 in the country.
That's pretty good.
Top 50? Top 50. Like, I think top 50.
That's one per state, roughly.
Yeah,
That's
that
amazing.
is one per state, roughly.
Roughly.
I missed going to the big, like, national tournament by, like, 2 people. Yeah.
That's when you needed the chosen of endings.
Yeah.
A series of unfortunate events. But
yeah, and people are like, oh, you weren't in the top 10, you weren't any good. And I was like, top 50 is really fucking good.
You're
what
like, I don't think you understand how much America there is in America.
America, yeah. Like, I've had a lot of people dismiss or downplay that as an accomplishment because I wasn't, like, the best and I didn't actually make the event, which was a bummer because I missed it literally by, like, 2 people and because of alphabetical order. So
what? You got spec'd? Oh.
Yeah, I was tied with a bunch of people for, like, the last slot. S comes after letters at the first level of the alphabet.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Yep.
Is that why you changed your name from Zizerstein?
Yes. Didn't you know? I should have gone higher on the alphabet, to be honest.
You're like, actually, you'll notice that the first letter in my name is a non-breaking space, which alphabetically appears before all letters.
You know those big, like, blue industrial trash cans? The ones that sometimes are on wheels?
If this is a setup for an elaborate "you're fat" joke, Monica, I am so here for it. But yes.
No. I could standing jump over one of those. Like, just from a ground. Just over it. Yep.
I hope you made that audible noise. You're like,
Yep.
the hardest part is setting up the Bluetooth speaker so it makes the sound effect
Yeah.
when I feel it.
Now too heavy and not that strong.
Gravity has also changed in the intervening time. I think we can all agree that everything is much heavier these days.
Yeah. At least as far as this body situation is concerned, yes.
Exactly. I do like that as an idea, though, that character development, rather than being necessarily a slow, gradual process, can be something that you like chunk when you have that flash forward or flashback or something like that. And I think that's super neat as a way of saying, how do we do character development in a way that I still feel like this is the character I fell in love with when I first created them or something like that. I think that's an interesting way of tackling it for those of us who are like, but I like my character. I don't want the world to hurt them.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be through pain. There's a really great tweet an internet acquaintance of mine wrote that, like, I, like, saved and screenshot because it's stuck in my head forever because it really speaks to me about writing and character development and roleplay. And it's like, says something to the effect of, like, suffering is easy, healing is what's dynamic, exciting, and surprising. So I think there's also, like, people are recalcitrant to lean in on their character changing because they think it has to be through suffering, but suffering is easy. Healing is what's exciting, dynamic, and surprising. So it doesn't have to be negative. And I think we frame it negatively too much, and I think that's part of what scares people away from it. Does that also make sense to you?
It does, because frequently the positive things that happen are tied to those first 2 points. It's, oh, my character triumphed in this fight. I got XP. I now have this cool sword trick I have. Or character backstory development. Turns out you're the child of wizards or something like that, and you get something cool for that. And I feel like this ties back to a conversation I think you had at some point where you're like, why does no one in RPGs ever have a girlfriend or ever, like, get married unless that is what the game is about? Which is why I like that those exist as arcs in Invisible Sun, Take a Drink. How do you feel about character development mechanics, essentially mechanics that kind of force you to change how your character plays? Like, to me, at the low end of the spectrum, you have something like wound penalties. Like, well, you can't do that because your character in that way, because your character is literally missing an arm. That climbing thing isn't going to be quite the same. You'll figure something out, though. To say something like humanity in Vampire, or any of, like, the humanity-like stats in Chronicles of Darkness, to intimacies in Exalted, to character phrases in After the War, if you've ever played that.
I have not. That sounds cool. That vague description, I was like, I'm on board.
The TLDR for
Go
that.
ahead, tell me.
Yeah, you write up a whole bunch of statements that describe your character, like protect the village at all costs or something like that. If you have an encounter that does not go your way, like if you don't win that dice roll, the world changes you, and one of your character statements changes slightly, where it now may be defend your family at all cost, village be damned, or defend the village but know when you are defeated, or something like that, where subtly your character statements change over time, and you and the storyteller kind of do that to represent the trauma that occurs from you dealing with essentially a group of space Borg trying to possibly infiltrate and destroy your new colony after Earth was shattered in this space war.
Right.
So one of the hit point mechanics, as it were, is you're like, yeah, you can not die, but in exchange you have to change your personal beliefs. And if they change a certain amount of time, your character kind of cracks, or you can no longer change them. They are set in who you are. And once your character can no longer change who they are, your character kind of dies. Like, you're done playing that character.
Okay.
And that is one of the core mechanics of After the War.
I have complicated feelings about everything you just said, like all your examples. So, like, okay, let's talk about intimacies, because they're, of that list of things, they're the thing I'm most familiar with, and also will call the ones I like the best. I haven't actually played After the War, so I can't make a firm judgment on that. Intimacies are very interesting because they are little mechanical benefits for saying, I care about this thing. This thing is important to me. And they are meant to be changed. Even the third edition take on them, which is a little bit more rigid than the Essence take on them, are also still meant to be changed. And changing your defining intimacy is a momentous event. And I'm going to use intimacies as a good example here because the way they work is organic with the way the game goes, right? I feel like humanity is kind of a punishment mechanic for changing. Like I'm not as familiar with the newer World of Darkness stuff, so if you're like, they did it better this time, okay, cool, great, don't fight with me in the comments. This is my memory of mostly what was first edition Chronicles of Darkness, and the sins against the humanity track would be things that you would do in game, like fight. You would be like, okay, so we got into this fight, I had to kill this guy, this is a heavy moment, right? And then it's just like, and also we're going to punish your character's ability to continue to exist. And it's just like, stop. You put a punishment mechanic on what should have been an interesting moment of processing. I don't want character development mechanics like that to feel punitive. I want them to not push against the natural flow of the way a story unfolds, which is way easier said than done.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of the nature of playing a lot of dramatic, epic, or adventurous games that the consequences that are not you get stuff are generally going to be negative frequently in the way the world responds to you, whether it be like hit points or willpower or sanity or whatever. Like the idea that you've created another mechanic that I now need to roleplay and is also another like gas tank, but of morality is super weird to me sometimes, because it is good to have a mechanic to support an idea, but sometimes the mechanic abstracts it away too much. Like you want people to roleplay their descent into bestiality and vampire, and the humanity should hopefully be a guide where someone's like, oh, okay, I lost a point of humanity because I killed a mortal. Continuing on. Like I have never figured out how to do that balance.
Then there's also that, right? Like, so when you do things like, okay, in Vampire, killing ordinary people seems like a thing that probably happens pretty often, right? Like, you're vampires.
The entire mortal, what should I do? Yeah.
You're vampires, and like, the first time you oops the whole mortal, that probably should be a big deal. And then, like, become a thing you become callous to, and that's supposed to be, like, the horror, right? Like, or at least part of the thing that makes you feel a little uncomfortable with being a sexy Dracula, right? Like,
yes.
That should be where your attention is in Vampire, is that, like, I think you should want to play Vampire, have to have, like, deal with the, oh god, I killed a guy, and then that become a thing that becomes commonplace, and then you reflect out of character, like, oh god, I really have become a monster, right? And that's the thing. And when you tack a, like, and then also lose humanity on top of it, you're like, what is resonant about this? Why did you make a little track that I tick a box off of when I lose humanity, like, literally?
So what do you feel is the line then between a good mechanic that aids character development and maybe a bad mechanic that aids character development?
You know, that's a good question, because the good examples are few and far between. Or maybe I just simply haven't played enough storytelling games to find the one that has a really great one. Let me put it that way. Because someone's going to roll up and be like, this one indie game does it fantastically. And I'm like, cool, thank you. Send me a link and I'll buy it. Yeah. I would love to read it.
The thing I like about intimacies is what they are is on the character sheet. When it is see that the Scarlet Empire does not fall or avenge the fall of House Cessus or something like that, it is a clear directive. But when you go from Humanity 7 to Humanity 6, it's dots. It's not like you went from indifferent to callous. Right. Like, if that's how it were on the character sheet, I think that would be a little bit easier. To me, the mechanic, when I look at it as a player, needs to tell me what to do when I literally just look at what the mechanic is, as opposed to me being like, oh, okay, I'm a Humanity 4, or my needle and thread for Changeling the Lost has gone to this, or my dissonance trait is now 5, and now I have to, like, consult a table or something like that to see what my emotional response is. I like the idea of it being on the character sheet.
So I think the big difference is when we pry the lid open of what's going on here is that, like you said, humanity, clarity, trying to remember the ones from Chronicles, are a track, a chart. They do not reflect what your character values. They don't reflect what your character cares about, and they don't reflect what your character will do next, right? Whereas an intimacy is simply a very straightforward representation of all of that, which sounds a lot like the character statements from After the War.
Yeah.
And, like, I think you mentioned that, like, there's places where you must change those things, and I also kind of feel iffy about that as well. I generally prefer rules to encourage wanting to do so instead of mandating it. I'm always a fan of, like, your mechanics should be cool enough to engage with that people do it without you having to force them to.
So I will agree. In this game, the arrows towards this being the defining feature of you, in this actually being a game about beliefs and how they change, I'm okay with it being more forced. So
Yeah, that's
which is
fair.
context you didn't have.
So then I also probably shouldn't pass judgment on something I haven't read. In a game where that's not the central conceit, I think you should encourage people to buy in. And I'm still going to use intimacies as an example because they're good to have, because they intersect directly with the social system. So if you're going to play a social character, you need to make it a point to determine the things you care about. And you are not forced to change your intimacies when your character's opinions, thoughts, or feelings change, but you can. And it is in your best interest to do so, because the system props all that up. I actually really liked Chronicles' Virtues and Vices, and like going way back, I actually kind of liked Nature and Demeanor, and I would almost like to see those rules be improved and brought back. Maybe not for Exalted, because Exalted sure used Nature, I think. It was one of the two, because I remember Vampire had both. Yeah, it's just Nature. No Demeanor, just Nature. They were interesting little character development bits.
But the thing I also like about intimacies is it gives you an interesting way to mechanically represent kind of cool social scenes where in the same way that I think one of the cool things about Powered by the Apocalypse is you have things where you're like, okay, I have +1 position, or I have +1 going forward against. Like, I have a way on my character sheet to represent that this dude or doodad or dude them likes me. And intimacies also let you do that. So when you say, hey, I'm writing down on the princess's character sheet that doesn't actually exist because I just made this up, is inclined towards the circle of the 5 chosen. And they're like, So anything that kind of mechanizes that event occurring in a way that can be like recorded and is visible for the system hounds at the table, I think is kind of neat. And intimacies let you document that moment of change in your character in an interesting way, as opposed to just being like, well, you have 1 fewer point between now and damnation. Have funsies. Peace.
I think you're right there. I think when you have a system, especially, and we're just going to keep on rolling with intimacies being the example here, when you have a system like that, then people try to buy in. Especially in the case of like intimacies continuing, where the way they work in the social system for people who don't know is that they, in essence at least, they increase your social defenses against people trying to make you do things. So someone who is, if you care a ton about protecting your homeland, someone trying to get you to betray your homeland to the realm, your social defenses suddenly jump up because you're like, no, I care about that. Fuck you. One of the things that Core 3rd Edition does that I actually really like is it has a thing called a decision point where like, you can, when you're on the point of like maybe having to lose an intimacy, you have to make a hard decision, and that is mechanically reinforced, and stuff like that's pretty cool. And again, that's a thing you buy into because it's interesting, because the social system supports it. And I guess I'm saying that you can have good character development mechanics as long as it syncs up with the rest of your, as long as it means something to the rest of the game. You have to have a reason for those to be there. You can't just be like, well, do your role play and see what happens. People were already going to do that anyway.
Yeah, I do like the idea that character development as a mechanic is good, but it kind of loses something if it just feels like it is another health track that could be potentially ground down, as opposed to something that generates interesting bits and bobs that can reinforce somewhere else in the system. So you have a mechanic that basically says, yeah, you have these belief tokens. And some games do this with like touchstones or ways of returning sanity, which basically says, yeah, you have this resource that has been wound down over the course of gameplay. You can recover some of it by engaging with the things that remind you why your character is going up against Narithatep. And then there are mechanics for those potentially changing over time. I like that Pillars of Sanity system in like the Gumshoe system. I haven't played it in Delta Green yet, but I know they exist. And those I think I'm also pretty cool with. Anything that fleshes out what characters are doing during their downtime in an interesting way that also points back at the game, I consider generally a good thing.
Do you have feelings on Nature, being a World of Darkness fan?
Nature and Demeanor were systems whereby you had a noun. And the thing that I thought was beautiful about it when my little 7th grade brain popped it open was, wow, these are all nouns. As opposed to being like, you're...
Sorry, that's really funny. Anyway.
Yeah, as opposed to someone being like, oh, Jim's a dick. No. I, Jim, am not a dick. I am merely an autocrat. Ooh, an autocrat. Fancy. And they were descriptors that on the nature side, it's who you really were. And whenever you played into it in a particular way, you would gain back willpower, which in the early editions of World of Darkness was a bit more scarce than the modern, at least in Mage version of you get a point back if you get a good night's sleep. And then there was demeanor, which is how you came across to the world. There was no benefit to role playing into that. I like the idea. They were too totalizing. There was no way of representing the strength of that. So it was a world that was like running around completely full of strong-willed assholes, which to some extent is actually what the games were. So I get that, especially as a mage fan. I do like nature and demeanor. Nowadays, I generally just have characters pick how do you come across to other people, how do you think you come across to other people, and what are 2 character quirks about you? Because I am not playing games long enough for generally that nature and demeanor thing to really come into play too much.
Yeah, so Exalted First Edition, because it was very much sort of still climbing out of its World of Darkness cocoon, still had nature. Didn't have demeanor, had nature, and then had virtues, which Essence is virtues, but 3rd edition does not. Essence virtues are a very informed by 15 years of other game design implementation in Essence. They were dots on your sheet in 2nd and 1st edition. And I really liked them, even though they were kind of like, they kind of fell into the same trap as like humanity, where it's just like, here's some dots on your sheet, that means a thing. And like, I am not sitting here defending the quality of nature and demeanor as mechanics, but I thought they were, for the time, interesting ways to present a reason to develop your character that were fresher and more interesting than, say, like, alignment. And I think that they certainly could be revisited with a fresher look that maybe mechanizes it a little better. I think there's something that could be salvaged and redone and be brought back with a fresh coat of paint and actually be really interesting. Like, I liked the concept of those things. The rules for them just kind of sucked.
I like that it was pretty open and it did not necessarily tie to genre. So anything that can inform theme and mood but is not necessarily tied to a genre, I generally like in a game, and that they certainly do. Yeah, maybe tone it down a step, and I'm curious to see what that would look like. Like, I'm looking at Story Path, and I wonder if it's one of those things where it's like, if you do something tied to your nature that gets the group into trouble, get momentum, if you or something like that.
Yeah, you could do something like that.
Speaking of character development, the importance of every arc is that it ends, unless it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe or any of the number of properties that have just become this perpetual cash cow where stories have been replaced with the idea of a beginning and a middle and an end, with a beginning and a middle 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 and a middle. That is a line I picked up from Movies from Mikey, just to give full credit. Hopefully he hasn't been milkshake ducked. So let's end this.
As far as I know, he hasn't. I'm a fan.
Yeah. Yay!
Yeah. So you can always find the show at bxpcast.com, part of the Misdirected Mark Network.
Bing!
Thank you. You can send us an email with your thoughts and feelings to bonusexpcast@gmail.com, or you can do similarly on Twitter by adding us at bonusexpcast, and we will try to respond to you. If you want to come hang out with us, we have a Discord. There's a special patron room, but the community itself is open to everyone. You can go to tinyurl.com/bxpdiscord, pop in and join us. Make sure you introduce yourself and say hi. We'd be happy to have you. Terry, where can they get more of you?
I can be found at Terry Robinson on Twitter, where I post precisely 0 spicy RPG takes. But if you would like my spicy game takes, you basically need to invite me onto your podcast or be a close friend of mine. I really have nothing in between, and maybe I should work on that. My other projects are Pain in the Dice. It is also done by friend of the show, Chaz K, and we talk about our general thoughts on RPGs. Sometimes that includes something that are demi-spicy. I don't know if it still counts as a hot take if I have, like, footnotes. Like, I don't know if that breaks it out of the hot take category. Paininthedice.com. And also the mainstay of my time and where most people have heard me, Mage the Podcast, where we talk about the old World of Darkness game, Mage the Ascension.
And you can find me on Twitter. I am at Zenith Sun. I have given up making hot RPG takes there. It's too much stress. I don't want to do that anymore. Now I just occasionally post about my life and like retweet art. I do post more nuanced thoughts about tabletop RPGs, including advice and design tips and stuff on my Tumblr, which you can follow at Dice-Wizard.
How have you been finding that?
How do I like posting on Tumblr?
Yeah,
I love posting on Tumblr.
Yeah.
I love the tumbles. The tumbles is a much more pleasant experience because you can easily banish people who bother you. Like, it's so easy to just only, like...
Asshat banishing gesture is a 0 mote charm.
Yes. Yeah, it's permanent. It comes part of the fixture. Like,
Yep. And it's reflexive.
yes, it's very easy to curate your feed to only see things that you want to see. Tumblr has a really robust feature to like remove people or mute tags or block conversation. And if you block someone, like if someone's shitty and replies to you and you block them, that reply disappears from the replies. So nobody else can fight with them, which is fantastic because I had a thing about like, hey, here's a whole blog post about like, don't include mechanics in your designs that remove players from the game. Right? You're playing an RPG. This is not an elimination mechanic. And it's really boring to have to sit on your hands while everyone else gets to have fun for 3 hours. And things that like stun characters or whatever keep them from participating is actively shooting yourself in the foot if you are designing a traditional game.
Realistic recovery mechanics.
So, and then somebody was like, that's toxic to game designers. And I was like, one, read my pin post, which is literally a list of everything I've worked on that's in publication right now. And it's massive. And that's not even the stuff that's not even out yet. And two, begone from my mentions, insignificant worm, and I just blocked them. And then that reply disappeared, and nobody else can fight with that dipshit.
What would it be? Recitation of honorable endeavors? That sounds like a good social charm. Like, does that scan as a charm?
Like that.
Okay, got it.
That does scan as a charm. I like that. It's not that there's not trouble or discourse on Tumblr. It's just that it's very easy to not engage with it at all. As opposed to Twitter, which is designed specifically to make you mad, so you keep using it.
Yeah. Recitation of honorable accomplishments is the charm. Don't try me is the knack, right? I think. Okay.
Yes.
Just trying.
Yes. Yeah. Or the name of the stunt that the knack gives you. Everybody get out.
Yeah.
Get out of here, Terry. I gotta go eat lunch. Change it if you want to.
Do I have to do this? Really? Ugh. Fine. Bonus Experience is written and produced by Monica and Ray. And edited by Margaret. What the fuck? You don't even give me credit? Our logo and art is by Nino Studios. Find her on Facebook and Instagram. Our theme song is Reuse Noise with Delight by CDK and is used under the Attribution Non-Commercial Creative Commons license. BXP is a part of the Misdirected Mark Network. What? No. I'm not making a stupid gaming pun. Bye.